and welcome to LGBTQ plus and abroad. It's a Zoom meeting that we're doing today, hosting it virtually from wherever we may be in the world. So I'd like to start with introducing myself. I'm Heidi Bretz. I'm one of the assistant directors in the Study Abroad and Exchanges team in the International Programs Center at UNCG. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm joined today by Elliot Kimball as my co-host.
Hi, Elliot Kimball. I'm an assistant director within the Office of Intercultural Engagement. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I work primarily with the areas around gender, sexuality, LGBTQ advocacy, and inclusion, which is very much this. So we're super excited. I think this is the, third or fourth year, Heidi, we've done this. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think this is at least the fifth time we've had this particular meetup, and it's always been really successful. Students have a lot of questions, and of course you want to hear answers to those questions, and who better than from the experts themselves, students who have studied abroad before. So we're joined by two guests who are going to share their experiences studying abroad, and especially as it relates to identity as an LGBTQ plus individual, and just kind of to talk through some of those common questions that we hear from students who are interested in taking their education international. So if you wanted to start, we'll start with Eileen.
Yeah, hey everyone. So my name is Eileen, and I'm currently in Melbourne, Australia. I'm in my third year of study at UNCG. I study media studies, and let's see, my pronouns are she, her, hers. Yeah, I think I covered all the bases.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Melissa. I studied in Tartu, Estonia in spring 2019. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am currently a senior at UNCG, majoring in international and global studies with a Russian studies concentration.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you again for sharing your experiences with us and with the wider world virtually. So we'll jump right in. We have a few questions that we prepared just to kind of get a sense for your experiences studying abroad. And then if you have anything else you'd like to add afterwards, we can definitely incorporate that as well. So first off, what are your experiences from studying abroad around gender and sexuality?
Melissa, did you want to go first?
No, you can. I'm still figuring out the answer to the question.
So is that in relation to where we studied abroad, of course?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely an interesting juxtaposition between where we come from, which is, North Carolina, a southern state. And I always say that to people whenever they ask where in America I'm from. I say I'm a little southern state, North Carolina, and everyone kind of usually winces a little bit because, the South has quite a reputation, especially in terms of how it's handled queer history in general. But I would say that Melbourne is incredibly, if not one of the most diverse places in terms of gender identity and sexuality. Especially, I would say, of course, kind of as it is everywhere, depending on the age of the person. So typically younger people are far more accepting, and then the older population is, I would say, maybe about the same as North Carolina, but yeah, it's an incredibly diverse, and there's a massive queer community here. So it's been a really incredible experience coming here and sort of seeing that.
Thank you. Melissa, did you have an experience you wanted to add?
I agree a lot with what Eileen said. I think when it comes to LGBT, where I studied abroad, a lot of people are a lot more closed off. So you can never, it's hard to express yourself in Tartu sometimes because everyone's really private. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be afraid to show who you are, but like a lot of the older Estonian population is not very accepting. So it was kind of hard adapting to that. But like I said, there's accepting people out there. There is just really more personal and so it's hard to meet people that are from the LGBT darker. I hope that answers the question, though.
So both of you kind of touched on these things, but were there things that you noticed in terms of cultural or environmental differences that you feel like addressed, supported, or oppressed LGBTQ plus people specifically? Some of those things that might be transferable to other places, some of those cultural differences.
Yeah, I will say, I'll just share the story because it's still really funny to me. So in America, typically, I know that I found that the use of the term partner kind of refers to somebody who might be either closeted or maybe just like not wanting to be super open about the fact they're dating someone of the same sex or same gender. And so when I got here, everybody here refers to their spouse as partner, or their significant other or whatever. And so I was like, oh my God, everybody's gay. And so it was definitely, it took a little bit of getting used to that, and how partner here is a very, like, people use a lot of gender neutral terms here, which I think is like incredibly, I would say progressive, but also like now when I go out in public and I say to people, my partner, you know, I don't have to out myself, but also people don't know if I am or if I'm not. And I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah, in Porto, we never say the partner. A lot of people say husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. They never say partner because partner, they think the same thing. They're like, oh my gosh, you're gay, oh my gosh. But it's interesting how around people will just look at you and think that you're gay by the way you look. And coming back here, I never really experienced someone coming up to me saying, oh my gosh, you must be gay because you look so much like a guy, but you're a female. So a lot of what Eileen said is a bit opposite to what I experienced while I was in Tartu.
Thank you. And kind of the meat of what we're hoping to talk about today. And we did have someone join us. Hello, over there. So what would be advice that you would give both for while students are abroad and things that they can do in advance to prepare or better understand cultural implications around LGBTQ identity, or in general?
Very big question. I don't know, and I feel like slightly privileged in saying this just because I've had such a positive experience coming abroad. But like, it's just been so, I would say, mostly overwhelmingly positive. That being said, there are still a lot of things that are similar to, so it's not like a perfect world here, where I feel like I can be completely open all the time. Still, whenever I walk down the sidewalk with my partner holding hands, we get catcalled all the time, and there's still people who, you know, look at us and all that. So it's not perfect. I would say, I don't know, I don't have any like very eloquent advice that I would share other than just, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that didn't really answer anything, I guess, but might need to think on that a little bit.
I'm sorry about that earlier. She comes in when she feels like. So I also had the same thing happen. When me and my partner were walking down the sidewalk, they would look at us and would approach us with, how do you say, not a well attitude, but I would just say, you know, you are who you are, shake it off. I mean, it wasn't the most perfect experience, but I mean, as long as you were comfortable, and that's all that matters, really.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just going to add in one thing as well. Sorry to like backtrack from your experience as well, but I would say in Melbourne, and obviously depending on the area that you go to, study abroad presents like a perfect time frame to sort of explore more of those parts of yourself if you haven't already, or if you're not comfortable. It gives you, I think there's this overwhelming sense of like, I'm not going to be here forever, which like may be the case for some of us. But that kind of gives you a lot of freedom to kind of say, okay, this is just a temporary part of my life, and I'm only here for a little bit, and therefore like can kind of burn some bridges sort of. So I'm not afraid to be out and proud, because if it backfires, I'm leaving anyways. I guess that's kind of one thing that I would recommend to people, is just exploring all that and really like trying new things and etc.
That's great. So that kind of ties into our next question, which specifically looks for advice that you would give students who to think about while they're abroad, but also things they can do in terms of in advance or preparing to better understand some of those cultural implications that y'all have talked about. What would you tell others?
Melissa, do you want to take this one away? I need to think about it for a second.
Sure. I would just say shake it off, really. I know it can be hard at moments, and just feel comfortable with yourself. You don't have to tell everyone your sexuality unless you're really comfortable. Sure, out there's people who are accepting. I've approached many people who are not accepting. I've lost friends because of that. My roommate, I was not very good with my roommate either. Just shake it off, be yourself. Don't be afraid to show who you are, really. I mean, you'll come across some conflicts with people, but it doesn't really matter, really. Adapting to that was kind of hard at first, but it got better as time passed.
Yeah, I would say in some ways, I mean, there are a lot of similarities, I guess, to North Carolina, though. Melbourne, the city itself, the downtown district, is very different from an outer suburb in Melbourne, where it's very much like a country town and like a small town. And there are very much, I would say, those kind of Southern beliefs sort of there that can be seen there. But so I guess, unfortunately, you do definitely have to practice some code switching and knowing sort of when to kind of turn on how out you are, and then when you kind of have to, unfortunately, dial it back and kind of know that, okay, this isn't really a safe situation to be talking openly about my partner. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but I think, as with North Carolina, I'm sure if we've all grown up in North Carolina, we kind of learned to do that anyways. But yeah, I would say it's kind of the same here, of just being able to judge the area that you're in, the people that you're with. It's a very important skill as a queer person, I feel like. Oh,
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. I was going to say, and this might be a better question for Melissa, since Eileen, you are still in Melbourne. But how do you find yourself reacting to life back in the United States after your experience abroad? And how has it shaped your understanding of gender and sexuality, either writ large or your own personally?
That's a very good question. Well, when I returned to North Carolina, reacting to this topic, is there any way? I'm sorry. Can you reword the question? I'm not sure.
Oh, sure. So how was your adjustment when you came back to the U.S.? And did that shape any of your understandings around your own gender and sexuality, or kind of in kind of the theoretical sphere as well?
Well, it did take some time to adjust back to the time, of course. But I think after coming back, it helped me understand that you shouldn't be ashamed who you are. When I went abroad, I wasn't sure who I really was or who I was meant to be with. I think I gained a bit more confidence in being who I am after coming back from abroad, because I was kind of scared. I'll be like, oh my gosh, maybe this person wouldn't be accepting. Maybe they wouldn't like who I am. Maybe they'll think of me as different. So I think coming back from abroad, I had a more positive attitude in who I really was, and to know that if you are someone of LGBT, you're still a person. You're not different than anyone. You just have a different liking, or maybe you like a certain gender like I do. So it gave me a more positive attitude and gained more confidence in who I really was, and to be more open of who I was. If someone had a question, I would tell them who I am, and I didn't care if they thought of me as weird or not. It's just who I am. So it definitely changes your life as a person and helps you gain a bit more confidence. And so,
Thank you. And kind of, Eileen, to flip that question, have you found yourself reacting to, had you originally planned to stay abroad for a full year?
No, so I actually came here. Sorry, the seasons are switched. So it would be
Yeah.
UNCG's fall semester.
Mhm.
I came here last semester essentially. And then only like a month in, I was like, gosh, I love it here so much. And so I immediately emailed my advisor. I was like, can I please stay for another semester? And I actually did come back to the States for, the Christmas holidays. Yeah, but sorry, what was the question?
How, like, basically with your extension of your study abroad program, how did you react to that? What did that help shape your understanding of your gender, sexuality, or kind of what was that experience like for you in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think that while I've been over here, because it is, I don't know, it's definitely like full of contrast, and I apologize if I've come across as like contradictory. It's very much like the South, where I think Greensboro and especially UNCG can kind of be a bubble where like being queer is okay and there's lots of diversity celebrated, but as soon as you step off campus, there are certain areas where you really cannot be that same way. And so the same with Melbourne, certain suburbs, super great, super very queer friendly. And then certain areas where it's not quite as celebrated. I would say overall, I've built a lot of confidence in being out, and I've become a lot more comfortable. And even as someone who came out officially, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago, still, I still like obviously face those challenges of like being comfortable saying, using she, her pronouns when referring to my partner. But I would say that being here, and there's sort of a practice that comes with like being out and everything. Yeah, and so I think I've definitely become a lot more comfortable with sexuality and gender and all that, for sure.
Wonderful. And we do have one question from our audience who seems to have left us for the moment, but I did want to ask it.
Yeah.
What positive and negative things did you realize about being gay in America once you came home? Just any realizations about how America treats their LGBTQ plus community compared to where you studied?
It's a very big question. It's a very good question. It's a very big question. Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. So what positive and negative things did you realize about being gay in America once you came home?
Oh, man. I guess what I would just overwhelmingly say is that there's still a long way to go, for sure. And of course, like with all of this, I think queerness is very dependent on the region. Like being in LA, totally chill, totally lax, as compared to being in like, I don't even know, some random city in North Carolina. Let's see. I think that overwhelmingly though, there's tons of work to be done. I don't know, it's a very big question. Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway that I saw, is just that comparatively, there can be more done, especially for, I would say, the lesser acknowledged communities like the trans communities and non-binary communities. There's so much more progress to be made in terms of making sure that those people feel acknowledged and they feel represented.
I agree with what you say, Eileen. I think there is a long way to go. I think there could be more done with for the community, definitely. Yeah, I would say a long way to go as well.
Thank you for that. So I think that takes us to the end of our questions that we had. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or throw out there? Just thinking about the theme of what we've talked about and things you can potentially share with students who are considering going abroad or trying to sort of feel out implications for maybe identifying as queer abroad.
Let's see. Of course, I would never want to imply that somebody, oh, sorry, my connection is bad. I would never want to imply that somebody go outside of their comfort zone if they do not feel, safe in doing so. But I think that study abroad, of course, depending on the region, is a really great opportunity to sort of explore those areas if you were afraid to back in your hometown, because I think a lot of hesitation with sort of exploring queer identity is sort of a reputation that you have locally. Whereas one of the upsides to studying abroad temporarily is that you don't have to really worry about that in the long run, because you'll be on another continent, 6 months in the future. So I think it presents a really good opportunity for that. Let's see. And I've always said, and this is kind of like a general rule for me, that I find a lot of empowerment in queerness out of oppression as well, which I know, of course, might kind of sound like an oxymoron, but I found that finding these niche queer communities, even in regions where it's not accepted or tolerated, is incredibly empowering to still see people come out to these clubs or to these parties or these events where queerness is like the main factor amongst everyone. I think that's just so powerful, and it there's something to be celebrated there, even in times that you have to be hidden or more closeted. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I would definitely say in the region that you're in, some are more accepting than others. I would say being abroad gives you a lot of time to think about who you really are if you're unsure about it, which I took some time to think about who I really was, because I was unsure. But I would also say, if you're not comfortable, then the time comes when you're comfortable. And if you want to maybe talk about someone, it would be important to look up like a LGBT party or something that they might be having around, because they always have them somewhere. I couldn't really find any, but definitely it's a good experience to figure out who you are and to feel comfortable in who you are, and it also helps you come out opposed to being here in America. Yeah.
And kind of building on what you said, Melissa, how did you all make friends and find community in your respective study abroad locations?
Well, making friends wasn't hard. Making friends was pretty easy, but finding a community of LGBT was a bit more difficult for me, as many people are very personal and closed off. They had like maybe 1 or 2 flyers up in the lobby of where I was staying, but I mean, no one really talked when I attended the meeting. No one really wanted to talk about anything. So finding some kind of groups like that, I would rather went to talk to the one who hosted the event to see if there was any other group I can go to who's more open to talk about it. I only went to a few, but it was hard to make friends in the LGBTQ community in Tartu, because they didn't really want to they weren't really open to foreigners for some reason in some of the groups. As with making friends, I didn't make friends from LGBTQ community. A lot of the friends I made were just people who I lived with, but they were very supportive of who I was. And some of them could tell when they asked nicely about, are you bi, are you? But they were the important thing is that they were very supportive of me. But I didn't make any LGBTQ friends. I didn't make any.
I think overall for making friends abroad, the thing that I would definitely recommend is actually, I know that typically what a lot of schools do is they group together all the international students and they kind of encourage you to bond with each other, and that's really great. But I've actually found that probably my longest lasting and best friendships have come from people actually local to the country, and of course now coming back, that's been really beneficial because everybody else has left. But yeah, I would definitely say like make friends with people who are from and like live in your country, because they can really give you a full cultural experience, and they can kind of sort of help guide you as to, I mean, every question that you have. As far as making queer friends, I'm going to say a slightly controversial answer, and say that Tinder was actually a really good tool, which I became friends with everybody that I met on Tinder, and I'm still friends with everybody.
We've actually heard that before in previous sessions, that Tinder is a great way to find friends.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah,
Thank
so
God.
you're not the first person to say that, honestly.
It was genuinely, I mean, because there you're literally finding, you don't have to ask the question of like, are you gay? Because it's like, yes, of course you're on Tinder looking for women, or, you know, it's like, yeah, of course I'm gay. So you can sort of bypass that conversation. So that's a really great method. Another slightly, well, I wouldn't, not even taboo, but I would say that there's a suburb here that's very hipster, very like indie, just very progressive, artsy. And they kind of have a designated night to celebrate queerness. It's Thursday, that they call it Thursdays, with one club in particular that has this massive bash, and it's like incredible. And there's also like a drag diner. Anyways, I don't know why they chose Thursday. It's awful for school the next day, but congregating in those places is like, I always say it like replenishes my soul for the week, even in those instances where I haven't had enough interaction with queer people. It's just such a fulfilling thing to be in that space. And I don't know, I get really overwhelmed. I sometimes cry at Thursdays because I just get really emotional about it. But yeah, that's what I would say. Tinder and queer clubs.
I'm so happy that you actually found friends who are actually from Australia, because in Tartu, the Estonians like to be in a group by themselves. They don't really like to meet foreigners. So I'm not surprised I didn't really make Estonian friends, which I would have liked it, but they're all in the 5th floor of where I was staying in. They never come down and talk to nobody.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's definitely also a difference of like, Melbourne has like a massive international population, like an immigrant population. It's incredibly, like, I would say it's probably as diverse as like somewhere like New York or something, where it's like heaps of people come there because they know that's the place to be. And so I think that might be a difference as to why people might be more like willing to kind of make international friends, because everybody knows like a bunch of international people.
Well, I did make friends in the town square, but they were all not Estonian. They're all from different countries. Because Tartu is kind of cultural diverse, definitely in the town square, but you never see Estonians. I met people from everywhere, but never from Estonia.
Mm-hmm.
I guess another question. Oh, sorry, I'll let you go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know one of the things that students are concerned about is finding good housing, especially good, safe, supportive housing if they are in the LGBTQ community. So I was wondering if you could tell about your experience finding housing, and then kind of what living abroad was like for you.
So there is a website in Australia that is pretty much directed towards international students looking for housing, which has its benefits and also kind of its cons as well. But one of the benefits is that they actually have, I think they have a little box that you can tick saying like, I want somewhere that is LGBTQ friendly, which is hugely important. It's like, I would say it was probably the number one thing I was looking for, because of course, coming from the South, I was like, I can't be abroad and like closeted, like that's not what I want in my own house. So I would definitely say investigate what the websites are. I would also say definitely don't be afraid to ask whoever you're rooming with, or whoever the landlord is. Like, definitely make that a priority to say, you know, like, hey, I come from a queer background, or I'm looking for a queer friendly space. Do you feel like this is it? Because worst case scenario, they tell you off and you can just say, okay, I'm not going to live there. And that saves you a semester of dealing with all that. So I would say now is definitely the time to be like obnoxiously upfront about it.
I also agree with what you said. Looking for housing in Dartmouth, definitely they always like to take your requests. Definitely, especially filling out the form, there is a box asking, do you have a request? Do you want to room with someone? Is there an environment that you're looking for? But I would say in Dartmouth, they don't really take your requests. You could request something the same day they sent out the email about housing, but they will not take your request. But I would say talk to the landlord. They can be pretty firm. They're not very open, but I would say definitely talk to the landlord and give a good reason why you want this particular house or this request, because they can shut out your request, because that has happened to me.
Heidi, do you have any other questions?
I was going to ask, what has your biggest challenge been that you faced while abroad, either related to your identity or in general? And then also, what has been the most pleasantly surprising thing that you've experienced?
I think the most overwhelming thing, I am very grateful in that the amount of time that I experienced homesickness was actually pretty limited, just because I was like so excited to be here. I was so happy to be here, and I really did like kind of build a life here. I don't know. I guess the most challenging thing is that in those times when you really do miss home and you really get hit with that homesickness, I think it was really hard for me to, of course, the massive time difference. I think the time difference I was working with was like 17 hours. To like stay in contact with your family, that's really difficult. But also I found that it was kind of really upsetting to see that, like, in a very selfish way, that my friends' lives and my family lives back home were moving forward without me. And then I know it sounds kind of funny, but like, you know, you find out that your friends have new boyfriends or girlfriends now, or they started something completely new, and it's just like their lives are still going on without you, and you probably won't know about all of it unless you talk really, really frequently, which I found that I wasn't talking to my friends that frequently. So it's definitely kind of jarring and upsetting to see, like, oh my gosh, so much is going on over there and I'm missing all of it. Like, I'm missing all the times that they hang out, and I'm missing all the conversations that they have, and that was really difficult for me.
I would also say time difference was definitely difficult for me. And I did have a good level of homesickness myself, definitely the first month. I think another challenging thing for me was I explored a lot with clothing. I put together an outfit that I normally wouldn't wear back here. And I was afraid to think, should I really try this, or should I really just stick to what I brought with me? So it was challenging trying to figure out how should I really do this. But what was amazing was that, sure, I got stares, but other people were like, "Oh my gosh, I love what you're wearing." So there was some challenges, but there were some positive moments. Yeah, I get emotional just thinking about my time back, because I wish it was still there. Because definitely fell in love with being abroad. I wish it was still there.
I guess to add on to that as well, I think that Melissa really touched on a very interesting point too, is that one of the more difficult things about being abroad for such a period of time as well is, and this is something that I feel like people don't really talk about, is that you build like a whole life over there. And it's the only way to really feel settled into the place that you go, is you have to start, like you get a job and you make this awesome friend group and you develop routines and you develop, you know, it's like, okay, I go to this coffee shop every morning and I go to this place for dinner and I do these things, you know, on the weekends. So you develop these routines, and then when you leave, you're just suddenly expected to like almost act like none of it happened, and it's kind of like almost ripped away of you, not to sound over dramatic, but that's a really, really difficult thing to kind of come to terms with. Yeah, and I'm in a different situation, I know, because like my partner's here, and so the plan is to live here permanently. But initially, when I came here before we met, I was really, it was a really hurtful thing actually, dealing with like the temporary feeling of everything, because it was like, God, like I don't want to get too attached to this place, and I don't want to get too attached to these people, but you also have to settle in and to really feel comfortable there and to get rid of the homesickness. Otherwise, you're just in this state of temporary, like almost meaninglessness, which I know it sounds like very dramatic and dark, but yeah, you do have to kind of treat everything, you have to pretend that it's permanent in order to get comfortable, but of course the reality is that it's temporary. That's really difficult.
Definitely study abroad is definitely something that you have to enjoy every moment. It was definitely life-changing for me. It gave me a big confidence boost to do things that I normally wouldn't have never done. I myself, kind of like what you said, I do plan to move to Tartu someday soon because I fell in love with that country. I would definitely move back.
Mm. Well, those were the negatives.
I think those were good. I think when you you shared challenges, you were wonderful, both of you, about how you navigated those. I think the finding of your own community and also the realities of really being able to let go of this sense of temporariness and being able to really commit to a life there, I think is one of the keys to being able to really enjoy your experience, particularly if you're identifying as queer, because we know that community can sometimes mean more if you're identifying in a way that's marginalized and you've had particularly a pretty negative experience in the United States. So I think those are great tips on how to navigate those challenges. So Heidi, do you have any other questions, or did you want to wrap things up?
I was just going to say, I really enjoyed hearing your experiences and really appreciate you sharing some of the tougher ones. And I think that one thing I'm going to think about, Eileen, is your kind of synopsis of how you have to balance like the need to create community with the temporariness of the experience. And I think I'll take that back as a study abroad advisor and really kind of think more on that, how we can maybe help students navigate that, because these are really big emotions, really difficult emotions that are pretty baked into what study abroad is all about. It is a life-changing experience, it is a confidence builder, but it's also really, really tough. And so definitely recognizing the courage and the commitment it takes to do those kind of big life-changing things. So I wanted to thank you both for sharing your experiences about that.
Yeah, thank you guys. Are there any questions from like previous semesters that maybe people had a lot?
I know people
I think we tried to think through those, but I think we covered a lot of them, or a lot of the questions. I feel like actually, I think the majority of the questions can probably be split up into more like logistical questions of like safety, culture. And again, there's some things that we just, even if we had like the most diverse panel ever, we just would not have experiences from all these places. And that, I think, is something we always recommend: doing your research and talking to other people and finding people that have studied there. And then I think the other thing is kind of what you all spoke to, is this idea of how do you find community in those in the places where you're studying abroad. I think those are pretty much the themes that we get each year. Heidi, would you agree?
Definitely. Those are the biggest pieces. And I guess if we wanted to go ahead and wrap up, just maybe one last piece of advice or one last story that you would share with people who are considering making the leap and taking their education to a different place.
Melissa, do you want to go first?
Oh, okay. Well, definitely enjoy every moment, because before you know it, one moment you're there, you arrive, and before you know it, you have to go home. I wish I could have done more, but I would say definitely enjoy every moment. Every moment you have is definitely something new to experience and explore. I would say that.
I think in specific relation to like queer identities and everything, I would say even if you don't think that they exist, I definitely would challenge people within the community to find those communities as well when they're abroad, just because I feel so strongly that like the lack of an open presence of queer representation doesn't mean that there aren't queer people there. They're just, you know, afraid, or they're closeted and they're afraid to kind of show themselves. So I would say, like, no matter what, definitely look for those communities, even if they're super hidden. And if not, you know, create those communities for yourself, even if it's just you and a group of people. Like, I think it's, again, just the most empowering thing to kind of say, like, this isn't allowed, this is looked down upon, but like, we're still here and we're still trying to get together, and we're still trying to exist together and create safe spaces for us. Yeah, I would say that. And of course, in the more optimistic side, if there are those queer spaces already present that have already been built for you, like, definitely engage with them, because it's incredible, and it's, I think, something that's very historical and powerful to do.
Well, thank you both very much for sharing your experiences with us. And we're going to be posting this recording to a couple of our different study abroad resource sites so that students can have that opportunity to listen to your stories and then think about some of the things that we've talked about today. So thank you both, and have a wonderful evening.
Yes.